Hello and welcome to the section 2 of our course, Understanding Infrastructure Security Part 1. In the Part 1, we are going to cover topics such as compute and AWS managed services that can help you with infrastructure security. In the Part 2 of this topic, which will be the section 3 of our course, we are going to talk about network and isolation and enabling connectivity within VPCs. So we start with the topic of using key pairs with EC2 instances. So if you had done previous AWS courses, especially on the associate level, this topic should be quite familiar to you, or also based on your hands-on experience. So the key pairs is the way that you have to interact with EC2 instances without typing a username and password. So SSH key pairs, it's quite usual and traditional way to SSH to EC2 instances. Now, I want to highlight some security aspects regarding that. So we start by making a quick tour of the key pairs and how that works in practice. So if you are familiar with the key pairs, you know that you will be able to find this part of EC2. In your console, there is a section in EC2 specifically dedicated to key pairs, and creating a key pair is quite straightforward. So in the section key pairs, you will be able to, with one click on create key pair, giving a name, let's say Bruno key pair, you will be able to quickly generate an SSH key pair that then you can use to interact with your EC2 instances. So now if we go and deploy a new instance, you will see that even keeping all the default settings, that by the end, when you are about to launch the instance, so I'm going to go just using all the default settings, and I'm going to straight to review and launch. And the first thing that it will ask is, how do you want to interact with this instance and which key pair do you want to use? So you can choose an existing one, the one that I created. And if you notice, when I created and generated in the key pair section, it actually downloads the private key to my local machine. But I can also generate a new one from here, and I can actually proceed without the key pair. If you proceed without the key pair, you will not be able to interact via SSH with this instance. Now I'm going to choose the existing key pair, and this is just for demo purpose. So I'm going to launch an instance. And what is happening now in the background while the instance is being launched is that when the machine boots up, this SSH key pair that I generated, so the public key, is being fetched from the EC2 metadata and being added to the authorized keys of the instance. So we already got the public IPs. We can SSH with this instance. So you will know that to SSH with that instance, use the command SSH from your console. The username is EC2 user, which is the default in AWS, and then you put the public IP. Now, of course, if you do it like this, you will need to provide still booting up, so the connection is still refused. Let's give it a couple more seconds. So the instance is now in running and initializing. So it will ask you, the authenticity of this host can't be established. Do you want to continue or not? And this is because it was the first time that you are interacting with this machine. And saying yes, it will not allow you to enter, right? Because you are not specifying which SSH key pair do you want to use to log in. So if you remember, when I generated the SSH key pair, it downloaded to my machine in the downloads folder the key pair, and I named it Bruno key pair, so it's called brunokeypair.pem. And when I do this, there will be an error, and this is one of the first things that you need to realize, that when you generate the key pair and it gets downloaded to your local machine, the permissions of that file will be to open, and by default, the default behavior of the SSH client is that it will not allow you to connect because the permissions are to open. So the first thing that you need to do is to narrow the permissions of that file. Now, if you're used to the POSIX system in Unix, you know that the way that you do it is you need to change mod, and then you give the new permissions and point to the file. Now, if you are not familiar, what is doing with this 400 is that I'm enabling that only the owner of the file can read, but not write or execute, and neither the group or others can read or write the file. So by changing the permissions of the file and then SSH into the machine, I will be able to log in into the machine. And here we go. Now, also something important to note is that you can generate an SSH key pair from any Linux machine and then import it to the AWS console. So the way that you do that is that using the command ssh-keypair, you will be able to, oh, sorry, mistyped there. So ssh keypair, sorry, ssh keygen, you will be able to generate a new SSH key pair, public and private RSA keys. So getting all the default values, you can encrypt that key pair with the passphrase. I will choose not to, and it will generate the key pair. So you will find it in your .ssh folder. You will find both the public key and the private key. So the private key you will never share with anyone. The public key is what you share, in this case with AWS, and this is what you import to AWS. So the content of the file, you have the public key, and you can now copy that public key pair, and then you go to the key pair files and say import a key pair, and the public key contents is this, and you can give it another name. I will call it Bruno generated EC2. And after you import it, then you will be able to use this new key pair when you launch new EC2 instances to log into them. Now, you can also very easily delete all the key pairs from here. So I'm going to delete both of them. One note is that one of them was in use, right? Which was the first one that I created that I used to log into this machine. And when that happens, when you delete, and this is one of the security things that you need to keep in mind, when you delete the key pair from the AWS console, it doesn't mean that any instance where you were using it will be invalidated. No, it actually just means that you will not be able to use that key pair to launch new instances. So if you recall when I was describing the process of the instance starting up and the key pair being injected, the public key is in this file, this authorized keys. So you see that my Bruno key pair public key is still here. So it means that actually if I exit, meaning that if I log out from this machine and log in again using that key pair that I still have in my local machine, I will be able to log in perfectly. So the way how to actually invalidate there, to revoke that access, is that you need to go to the .ssh authorized keys and actually delete the key from the machine. So when you delete the public key from the machine, so now the file is empty. When you do this, then if I log out and try to log in again, I will not be able to. So that's pretty much it. In summary, why this is important, because there is some security concerns that you need to be aware. And the major one, in my view, is this, that when you delete key pair from the AWS console, it doesn't mean that it will revoke from any given instance that you were using. It just means that you will not be able to use it to log into new machines that you deploy afterwards. So creating a key pair via the console is quite straightforward. Also importing an existing one, and deleting also quite simple, but revoking, just keep in mind that deleting from the console is not the same as revoking it from the instances. You can, of course, combine the deletion process with triggering the revoke command, so deleting from the authorized keys in all your instances using some AWS tools. We are going to actually discuss in this section one of them, which is the run command. But for now, keep in mind that it's not automatically.